But there c- and there could always be a part two, but it's
Yeah.
funny because when I do teach this one for CE, we get to the end and it's an hour and a half, and they're
Yeah.
like, that was the whole time? That was
Right.
it. Which makes me feel good, but
Right.
you know,
Yeah, 100%. All right, everybody. Well, cameras on, please, if you can, because we really do appreciate it when we're teaching. It's just so much nicer as a teacher to have see other people. And Rachel's going to be doing most of the talking today. And if you haven't met Rachel yet, you will, because we are going to have to line up another field trip soon, sometime this summer, I think. And
mhm.
the last one was terrific. But Rachel is with Lodestar Inspections, so she's been on here a number of times. If you missed them, we have the recordings in the coaching community. She talked about a couple of other topics, but today we're getting into mold, which I'm actually really interested to hear about. So, as we're going through, you'll probably have questions. Like if you do the digital hand raise, that really helps just because then we aren't all talking at the same time. And with that, take it away, Rachel.
Thank you. And if you just take yourself off mute and you're waiting for me
Mhm.
to pause, I will be watching for that as well.
Mhm.
And definitely ask questions and don't freak out about your own house, okay? That's all I'm saying. That's
Oh.
all. That is just don't stress because that seems to be a like when we talk about radon, people get kind of freaked out, and this one is like, oh my gosh, just but don't worry because you're gonna have such confidence after this, or at least know more and feel better about what you don't know. Does that help?
There
No?
you go. Love it.
Okay, so um just so I've been in business for 20 years and since 2006 when I started home inspections, and mold has been like the bane of every buyer, every homeowner, every realtor's existence. Everyone wants to know more because it's so terrifying. It's like the worst four-letter word in real estate other than code. Um, but if you've had any other tests done in with real estate, you've had um, I mean, you could have had asbestos or radon or lead paint or any other tests that you may have had. This one seems to be the most scary. And there's actually a logical reason for it. It's not just because you don't know things, but it's because there's actually no government standard or acceptable level that
Mm.
has been set for mold. There's no passing or failing. Different molds impact you differently that every day and and have an impact on different people different ways. There are also no government set ways to remediate mold. And like Maryland doesn't have someone like there are no regulations for how to do mold and how to get someone to how to hire somebody if you don't have to be licensed to remediate. And then interpretation of the mold levels, like you get the report and then all you have is numbers. It doesn't actually say what you need to what they mean. And the reason for that is, well, I'll get to that in a minute, but when you get to other tests, there's a pass and a fail. So there is evidence of past termites here, or there's not, or there are live wood destroying insect, or there's not. Your radon is 3.9, you passed. It's 4.0, it fails. Like it's nice to have set numbers. When you test for lead paint, the numbers are very clear and it's a pass or fail. The deal with mold testing is you get the report with all those numbers on it, and I'm going to show you a couple just so you can see in case you haven't seen one. But with mold, it's not just about the numbers, it's also about the field observations. So it's what is out there because mold spores are always being brought into the house by us and our hair, our clothes, our pets, kids' backpacks, your bag, whatever it is. If you bring in signs because you can't keep them in the car because you're getting groceries, and so you bring in your signs from the back of your car and they've been outside, they'll have mold on them. Everything does. So you're not going to find a house without mold, but is it mold that's growing and originating in the house? Or is it mold just that's normally occurring outside? And every environment's a little different. So that's why when you test, it's comparing those two things. But that's why mold is confusing for people, not just for real estate professionals, but also for home buyers, homeowners. It's like, what the heck? The government has been trying to standardize what's acceptable for levels of mold. And Maryland has been trying, and they passed. Does anyone work with renters or have any tenants that they know? Okay. So, so when there's a new law that came, I think it started in October, about with rentals, that if you have rental properties and your tenant comes to you and complains that they have mold or says to you that they have mold, you have 15 days to investigate or do an assessment. And then it has to be addressed within 45 days. Well, what's an assessment? They don't tell you. So does that mean that you go look at it? Or does that mean you hire somebody to go out and test? Or like there's nothing that clarifies that for you. So in right after that passed, I had a couple of property managers call me and say, okay, I have like 5 properties. I need you to go test. Because
I
I,
had I had one with mine. I have a rental property where right after that passed, a tenant reached out and said, "Hey, it smells like mold in the house." And now it turned out I did have a mold remediation special. I had somebody come out and
Mhm.
there was mold and we took care of it. But yeah,
So it's good to be aware of, and it's not, and sometimes it's a problem and sometimes it's not, depending on um all sorts of issues, and we will get into that. But that's when people test is, and these are super word heavy slides. I did not, because to get all the information in it's such a short period of time, I'm like, we're not going to waste time flipping through slides. We're just going to look at them, and you could screenshot them if you want to, but also they will be, Kirsten's got them saved, or we'll have them in your area. But let's talk about, rather than just with rentals, we'll go with what happens when you walk into a house and your client. So some clients will say, you'll say, okay, it's time to schedule the home inspection. And then they say, okay, I want a home inspection, I want radon testing, and I want mold testing. And you're like, well, okay, why rate or why mold? Did you see something? Some people will just say, no, I'm terrified of mold. I have allergies, my child has asthma, whatever it is. That's one thing. Or an autoimmune disorder. Any of those can be reasons why people just want to do it. And I say just have those, but they can be life-threatening conditions when they're exacerbated by mold or other things. So and I just did testing for someone the other day with Hashimoto's, and her exposure to mold, she lives in a high mold environment because she's made it that way. And because she has rabbits and she has their hay all over the floor in the main living area. So there are some things there that she's gonna have to change. But there also may be mold because they don't use the fan in the bathroom or the fan's been broken. So you might also have your clients asking to test for mold, or you might suggest it. Oh, I'll bring up this other one. On an inspection about 2 weeks ago, a buyer said, I had another house that had high levels of mold in it, and I've had health problems ever since. So I need to make sure that there's no mold here in my new house. So we did the inspection, and throughout the whole thing, she was saying, this smells weird. Something's odd. I'm having a weird breathing thing. Does anyone else have a problem? Does anyone else smell this? And the inspector and the agent said, no, but that doesn't mean you're not. So why don't you get mold testing too? And she said, no, if you don't smell it, I'll be fine. I won't test it. Document that stuff. Write it down when someone says that, and just say, I'm going to email you to remind you of this, that we talked about it, just so that you know. Because and so now she's moved in, or hasn't moved in, but she's gone in a week after settlement, and she's like, there's a mold problem. Nobody told me there was a mold problem. And we still don't smell it, and she's resisting testing for mold. But her agent's like, we told you. I told you twice. So just remember to document, document, document. So, And I had to say that to my inspectors too. Well, make sure you write that stuff down in your inspector notes about what the client says, if, because this is going to impact her. So if you see evidence of a leak, there's been an overflowing sink or there's a stain on the ceiling, those could all be signs that there is mold because water is the big driver of mold growth. And you've all seen it somewhere, I'm sure, like driving on your way. Let's say you're driving to a property and you see a beautiful, lush green lawn full of just grass and it's gorgeous. It looks like a golf course. And it rains overnight. You drive by the next day and it's full of mushrooms. That is, and I think we started talking about this last week or last time, but that is those mold spores were waiting to grow. They were just sitting there. And when moisture was added, they grew. So that's once moisture gets into a space and then mold can grow. If there's a musty smell, a lot of times in a basement, it's because the downspouts haven't been extended and you just need to put extenders on there, but you want to be watching for that. So when you look at listings, when you're previewing listings, when you're looking at photographs online, look and see, are the downspouts extended away from the corners of the foundation? Because if they're not, or away from the foundation at all, then you may just go to the basement, you'll smell the musty smell, or your client will say, it smells moldy down here. Then you go to the corners and just look, maybe pull back a little piece of insulation and see, and you'll probably find that there's evidence of moisture and that there's mold growing there. And that's perfect because number one, you look like you're psychic and like you know exactly what you're doing. The other place is under the front door or the back door. When you look up, if you are under the front door and look up and there are a lot of spider webs or it's darker there are a lot of dead bugs, bug carcasses. That can be another sign in that space under the door because that's where a lot of times water will just seep in, that it's not sealed well there. And then if you see something that looks like mold, and we're all adults, so I mean, I'm assuming I can't see everyone on here, but the people I can see are adults, and they're so you know what mold looks like, and you've seen it. So if you see something that looks like mold, and your client says to you, "Is this mold?"
Mhm.
That you don't say yes and don't say no. Say we can't know without testing, and we can test a home inspector. Yeah, no, a home inspector can test. We can, if you want to get it tested to make sure it is mold. That's the important thing is that asking a seller to remediate moldy conditions in a house is not effective if you don't actually know for sure that it's mold. You've got to be able to prove it, and that's why the mold testing is needed in a house that is involved in a real estate transaction. Marie, did you have a question?
No, thank you.
Okay.
I'm just I'm
Okay.
just following you and then knocking because some of the things are so it so
Yes, yes. And we
Mhm.
talked about this last time, didn't we, a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So,
Mhm.
so you will be testing what you see. That is a bulk sample. If you see something that's taking a test of it, the bulk sample is with a tape sample or a swab sample. And it literally is a piece of tape or a swab, like a cotton bud, a Q-tip. So those are like we're using those to test. Now we're not growing mold, we're collecting samples, and the lab is then taking what we provide and counting what spores they see and what types of spores. So that is what's happening with that. But a lot of times there's a growing mindset. You have a growth mindset. Buyers have a growing mindset that we're growing the mold and we're not. But that's what we're trying to do is just see what's here and then how many are there. Then the other one is the air sample. This would be used for people who are concerned, and you don't have to know this. I'm just telling you so you have like a background a little bit. The air sample is done for everything else. Peace of mind. I smell something, I see something and want to know if it's getting into the air. You said there's something in the furnace. you took off the cover on the furnace and you saw something that looked a little like mold, let's find out if it's in the air, that kind of thing. Those are what we're testing for with the air sample. And it's the same thing. There's a there's a little slide inside our sampling container and it's sticky and it just everything lands on it. We're pulling the air through, it lands on it, and then the lab is counting those and seeing what they are. Kirsten, you want to take Dennis's question, which is if a seller knows he has mold, does he have to disclose it?
Yeah, I was just seeing that. So yeah, sellers have to disclose what are called latent defects. And so if I had a seller and it had been tested, then you absolutely 100% should be disclosing it. Where it gets on the gray area was where I see something and I don't know if it's mold yet. And if it's something that's very visible, that might be a gray area. I personally would probably disclose it because I'm of the mindset that it's just better to disclose, not try to hide anything. It just falls back on you so easily. So I would tell your seller to disclose, especially if it's been tested. Say, you know.
If it's tested, it's hard to hide that you don't know.
Right.
Yes. And if your seller, one of the things you may be wanting to look for while you're doing your walkthrough at your listing presentation is there evidence of water, of a water event? That means a leak, a flood, high humidity, any of those things. Or if you're sensitive to mold, and you will become more sensitive to mold the more houses you're exposed to. So
Yeah.
I was not nearly as sensitive to mold in 2006 as I am now. And you will be, it will happen to you. Kirsten, you looked like you were saying the same thing.
I was going to say, I carried N95s in my car before COVID.
Yes, 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 yes,
Just because
yes.
of what you're saying. Yep.
Yep. And so just be aware of that, that you will start to notice those things. And as you're going through a property, you can be like in your head, not saying it out loud, but like with a poker face, oh yes, lovely basement. I see you did finish it. Uh-huh. And be following your nose because or your sinuses or your whatever starts to or your throat getting a little scratchy. Pay attention to those signs because those are the ones that are telling you there's something else here. And on a home inspection or during while buyers are coming through and just looking at the property, someone's going to notice it. So it's better to have an awareness of it if you're able to. And the buyer, and we'll talk about that a little bit, but the main thing is to be aware of that when you're there, so it's not a surprise for later. Because then you can educate your sellers about it. And yes, they might say, "Oh, I want an agent who doesn't care," and you do
Right.
not want to end up with that, no matter how broke you are. You do not want to end up with that seller
Nope.
because that is guaranteed real estate jail
Yep. And,
Mm.
and
and this is
other
so much
things.
easier to take care of if you do it prior to, we don't want to be dealing with this during the home inspection period. Because first of all, the seller now can just take care of it and it's not going to be that bad. They would have to take care of it later anyway, probably somebody's going to ask them to take care of it, but now they can do it on their own schedule. But also when a buyer gets that news, like they might just back out of the contract because of it,
Mhm.
because so it just will help your transaction if they take care of it in advance.
Yep. And it will also build confidence for people
Yeah.
when you can show that we saw this and had it taken care of.
Right. And
Or,
here's my report afterwards showing the levels. Yep.
yep, yep. And that's called clearance testing. So after remediation is done, then the company will do clearance testing or hire an outside company to do clearance testing just to make sure that they've actually achieved what they were trying to achieve. And this is out of order, but I'll tell you the clearance testing should be done about a week after the remediation. You don't do it right after, otherwise you'll end up with higher levels just because there will be some spores left in the air is generally the way to do it. And then you end up having to test again. Um, the so I also said at the beginning of this that everything is all the results and the numbers are based on, first of all, it's the number of spores that are there compared to the number of spores inside to compared to outside, and what types of spores they are. With the bulk sample, the tape or the swab, it's actually because it's something we're looking at and it's actually a piece of something we're taking, there is, it can be, it will be, these are the ones that are here and these are the ones that are not here. These are detected, these are not detected. And some sellers will not allow mold testing without permission. We did have a seller threaten to sue us once for stealing because we took mold on a swab. I mean, the buyer hired us to do it, and the agent said, yeah, please take a sample of that. And the seller said, you took something from my home without permission.
Mm.
That's crazy.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
And it so I bring that up just because, real estate is so emotional that
Mm.
people can get kind of irrational is not the right word, but start to spiral. And no one ever spirals up. They they spiral down to this like their base fear level, and they're like, oh my gosh. So just be aware of that. And if you have buyers and they find mold and you didn't talk about it in the contract saying, go ahead, Kirsten.
I was going to say, for those of you who are using an Maryland Association of Realtors contract, which all of you might be doing them at some time. So in a county in Maryland, not Montgomery County, anywhere other than Montgomery County, Maryland Association of Realtors contract, you're going to specify which inspections you're doing in advance, and you can't do extras without permission. If you're using a G-Car contract, they don't put it like that. Like they have it a little more open. And the G-Car contract would be in Montgomery County and DC. And I am not licensed in Virginia, so I'm not going to talk about Virginia. But just follow whatever your contract says to whether you're allowed to do a mold inspection, without, like, if you can say it in advance, do it in advance.
And
Yeah.
and you might not know beforehand going in. Your buyer
Yeah,
might not say they want to test, and then you find
right.
something on the inspection and want to test. And
Yeah,
that's why saying it, specifying that, and any other
yeah.
tests that the home inspector
That's
recommends.
what I usually do. Yeah. For those of you who have given me an example contract, in number 8 on the home inspection thing, I always say as recommended by structural and mechanical inspector so that we can add another inspection if we want to. And I get the seller to sign on that. And then we are covered. Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks,
Yep.
Rachel.
Good. You're welcome. So with that bulk sample, the swab or the tape, it's not going to tell you numbers. It's not going to tell you this is really high or this is really low. It's going to say this was detected or this was not detected. And so that's important to be thinking about too. What you're getting with the bulk sample is this is here or it's not here for a list of different types of molds, not how much there is. And that's why if you do that, just to prove that is mold, you also want to know what's in the air. Is that stuff that's there on that door jamb in the basement getting into the air? That's because that's the bigger issue for most people is going to be, okay, so it's there and I feel like I could just clean that up. I've had that in my own house or whatever, but is it getting into the air? Because then if it is it in the carpet? Is it, and then people start with the spiraling of the fear and um back in the I don't know 80s and 90s there was a prime time or Dateline or something that was like the mold ate my baby, it was black mold and now my children are dead or something, and I make a joke of it, but there are people whose brains go there, and if you've read about mold and you get on the internet about it, boy, it's terrifying. You get down there, just you could be at the bottom of a barrel pretty quickly. Chat GPT tells you that your signs and symptoms, it's not a stubbed toe.
Demon
That's a sign
always
of exposure to
from
mold.
outside or same type outside.
Um, so what happens is, and this is a mold test from a property I did, so I'm just showing it to you and then we can talk about it. But so just be aware of that. The air is a good one to have with the swab because you want to know if it's in the air. You want to know if it's getting out there. So if the mold levels outside are really high, and or if the mold levels outside are significantly higher than inside, then mold is not likely to be originating in that area that we tested inside. So I'll go through this to show you what's on a mold report. Everyone's a little different, but the major thing to know is the spore types, the final count, and then the hyphal fragments or the roots, and that's down at the bottom. And because the number of roots, if it's got a high level of roots, then the higher the level of roots, the closer you are to the origin of the mold growth. That's another clue that we're following. You do not have to remember this or know this. I'm just telling you. And so I'll just show you how to read this. This total at the bottom is the place where most people's eyes go immediately. That's why I have it in orange, because the first several times I showed it, everybody's eyes were looking for a total. So it's highlighted, but it means almost nothing. And I'm going to show you why on the next screen. But we're looking at the ones that are black mold, considered the slimy black molds that have the create the most mycotoxins or are most bothersome to most people are the Chaetomium, which is this one, Chaetomium, and then the Stachybotrys one. And those are the first ones that I'm always looking for. And it's those are they when you see those are when there's a lot of moisture, and they are usually kind of slimy looking. Yes, Dana.
Hey, yeah. So when somebody gets mold testing done, does part of the process that they pay for include someone from your team kind of walking them through and talking them through these results, like how you are with us?
Yes. So
Okay.
we are different from every other home inspection company that I know, because and it's funny because I didn't realize this until in this specific standard. And Dallas, I know, had to go, so I just saw that. The most home inspectors just provide the report, and we actually say there's something more to do, or and this is why, or or it doesn't look like anything needs to be done. So if I got this report, now we don't tell you what to do. We don't do that. Is an industrial hygienist would create a protocol for cleaning this up, for doing remediation. However, when I'm going to show you this one, and then we'll get to the next one, and I'll show you kind of what I might say, what I might tell you with the report. But if with this one, if this came in, so what I send is here's the report, here's where we did the samples, and then, so here's this. This is called the fungal spore report. This goes to the buyer along with something that says, here are the places we took the samples so that they can see where that is, and then a recommendation, either to do more investigation and to probably get remediation, or nothing else at this moment appears to need to be done based on these air samples.
So it's just that it's just like in text, this is like if you need to take a next step, this is what it is, and if not, then you don't. Like it's not walking through and telling them in more detail or anything like that.
If they need it or want it, it can be done. Yes, we can.
Okay.
It's most people find that what I write, because I have been able to evolve it over time to answer the questions that most people have, they can read it and look at it. But some people still want to talk about it, and which is fine.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, because I feel like you've said certainly some helpful things, like in this conversation. And as a newer real estate agent, I'm thinking, all right, which of these should I like be remembering? Which of these things should I say versus what the, person who is doing the testing or the remediation team, what will they say? Because I think you're right, people could spiral. And if I was spiraling, I got this, I wouldn't know what the heck any of that meant,
And I
which
don't think you
might.
should try to. I wouldn't try to answer it. I would just be
Good. Okay.
referring to Rachel. Like really, like
Yeah.
We don't want to be the expert on this. We
And
want, we
I
just
don't
want
want
to,
to either.
no,
Yeah, no,
no, we,
I'm
and
just,
we don't want to. So just like, even if I know, even if I think I know, I'm still gonna refer them to the inspector, even if I think I know the answer.
no, fully. And I guess
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, I would just want to make sure that, like, if I can tell they were worried about mold and they get this report where they don't know what anything means, that someone is going to be able to talk to them about it because it's not going to be able to be me.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Yes.
that's really what I'm checking because you're right, they could spiral.
Yes. Yes.
There's a
So,
lot on
so
here
that's
and it
why
doesn't
you
make
need
any
a
sense.
good home inspector, right? Because
Yes.
you want a home inspector who's willing to not only talk to them, but was going to talk to them in a way that's not going to freak them out.
Yeah, make them feel more relaxed about it. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So that's good
Yes.
to know that that additional conversation is available if they want it. That's good. Thank you.
You're welcome. And that is it is and I was teaching this class for CE in Anne Arundel County at their convention, and they were like, what someone said, asked me a similar question, Dana, and another agent who's been in for like 25 years, she turned and said, home inspectors cannot tell you anything. All they do is the testing. And part of part of my business philosophy is that I don't let my inspectors do more than 2 inspections a day so that they are fresh and not rushing and actually have time with buyers, and so that they have more, they're able to have more knowledge and return phone calls. And so a lot of the inspection companies in our area, it's more about how many can you do in a day.
Yeah.
So it really is like we are not the cheapest ones, but we do provide the best service before, during, and after. So because of the extensive training. So that's the structural training, the mold training, the radon training that's different from most other inspectors. We don't fix anything, but we do know more about these things than your average home inspection company. Or home inspector. So let's do this one first. And now, based on everything I've told you, if you look at these numbers, and I know you've had a lot of time to see what's written up on the screen, so it's this is what this is telling us is that there's nothing inside that's even close to what's happening outside. So this mold that's in the house is likely not coming from outside. I mean, not originating inside. It is coming from outside. The most common molds are this first one, or the second one, ascospores, Aspergillus penicillium-like, and the cladosporium. Those are just the most common ones. The and so you'll see those almost in every test. And when you see this basidiospores is another one that's really common, but it's related to trees. And so this is high outside, I mean, compared to inside. And there are no fungal spores detected inside, and there's 130 outside. So that's what I'm looking for, and I'm saying nothing really needs to be done. Then the next part that is here, well, I'm glad Dana got her question in before she had to leave.
I
That's
know.
good. And the next one is we're also looking at the debris rating. So this is how much stuff is in the air. And all of this stuff is explained down here, but nobody wants to read that. It really is. I'm telling you this just so that you know. If it's a super dusty place or that kind of thing, these levels might be higher, and then it's harder to see what's there. Okay, so now in this one, if we see that in the unfinished basement, we've got 2,700 Penicillium aspergillus spores, and outside there are none detected. Okay, that makes me think maybe something is happening in there. Maybe something's originating in the house. There aren't any fungal or hyphal fragments there inside, but there's very few outside. So, let's see. Now, what was interesting about this is I looked at it and I'm like, why are there so many basidiospores there? And Aaron, because you're on camera right now, I'm gonna bring it right to you. Um, this is specifically because they had wood piled up next to their fireplace.
Mm.
because they had brought the outside in, and so that was really, they had a ton of it, and they had, I mean, and it was damp. There was no other problem that we could find anywhere. It was specifically that. So, and we will get to that closer to the end. This one, but that, so there was the field observations told us more than the report told us, was the point of that one. In this one, there are a lot of spores outside. And I say a lot, it's almost impossible for you to even fathom what a lot is. Usually when there's a problem, it's usually tens of thousands. And um, generally, and I'll give you a guidance document also. Actually, I'll send it to you, Kirsten, so you've got it and you can just
Okay.
you can have
Yep.
that to put with us. But
Yep.
there's a kind of a guide of giving you an idea of what numbers are kind of normal in a house. But there are there's a there's some inside, and then there's this present. The P means present, and that is because this is overloaded. So this has a 5, which is a 5 out of 5 on the debris scale. There's a lot of debris in the air outside. There's a lot in the ensuite bedroom, but in the front sunroom where they had tons of boxes, all just dusty. They'd been there for years, and that overloaded the debris. If you have dust, you have mold. I hate that because that means that dusting actually has value. I don't like dusting. But that is what happens if you've got a lot of dust, that can be the problem. And I did a training or an investigation with a family trying to figure out why every single year the mom got sick the week before Thanksgiving and stayed sick all the way until the second week of January, every year. And it was specifically because, and it just took someone outside hearing it, like a coach. So I'm coaching them to figure this out. Every time she went right before Thanksgiving downstairs, dug around in the boxes, moved all the boxes on the shelves, very organized basement, but was doing all the stuff with these boxes, and that was disturbing the mold in the dust. Everything else was clean. These were just dusty boxes that hadn't been touched in a year. They were the holiday linens and decorations and stuff. So she would get sick and stay sick for that whole season, and then be fine the rest of the year. And that's what it was. It turned out that that was the issue. And so once we were able to solve that issue, then they just dusted in the basement and it was fine. But it was nothing is cut and dry with mold, which is why it's so confusing. And so with this one that says these are overloaded by the 5, that's what tells me the debris rating, which is down here. Explaining that is we can't even tell how many of these are there because there's so much other stuff in the report or in the sample. And that could be that there are bug legs in it. It could be there's fly wings. It could be other types of molds. It could be all these molds, but there's a lot of stuff happening there. So that's the issue. And that's why it's not just the report that is the issue, that is a concern, but it's also knowing what's happening in the field as well. And if you've ever done it yourself or you have tenants who've done it, I wish Dennis had been here to hear me say that. Oh, he's back. He is. It was Dennis, the other Dennis who left.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So what happens though with those
I'm back.
home
I'm back.
kits? Oh, okay. Thank you, Dennis. Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That I know every time we do this, almost the whole time you're on camera. So I guess yes, and I see both Dennis's. Here we go. So okay, so when we have those samples that you can get at Home Depot or on Amazon or something, they're like Petri dishes. Most people who get those to test get one and stick it in their bathroom, one and stick it in the kitchen, and one and stick it in, I don't know, the baby's bedroom or their bedroom. Those are going to they look terrifying. I get pictures from tenants all the time saying, we have a mold problem. Look at what grew in my house. It does look scary. I can't minimize that. And I'm not saying you don't have mold, but it means nothing to me without an outside number to compare it to. So if you ever have someone who says they're going to test for mold, remind them to get one or educate them about just sampling outside too, so there's a control that they can compare it to. Because there's mold everywhere. So you're not going to not have it. And that's the major thing. And if there's water, there can be mold. So if something smells musty, look for that source. Where is the water coming from? Oh, there's a hole in the roof. Now, if you're working with a cellar, or if it's your own house and you're like, my shower was leaking, and so there's this problem right here. Rachel, I need you to come test for mold before I do anything. I would say, if it will make you feel better, I will. And I would be a multimillionaire if I had done it every time someone asked me. But it's your house and you already know the history, so you know what happened. So you might want to, the first thing would be eliminate the source of water, stop the leak. So stop using that shower for a couple of days and then figure out, get that leak stopped. And then if you've got to cut some drywall out or look at it, that's something else. But you know what happened, you know where the water came from. And you don't necessarily have to prove it's mold to anybody. You cut it open, you had water, it's probably mold. It's not like when you look at bread that has gotten a little moldy, you don't go, I wonder if that's mold. I should get it tested before I eat it. No, you go, this is mold on the bread. And if you're like my husband or my parents, you just pinch that part off and eat it. If you see mold on bread, by the way, um, once you see it, those roots, those hyphal fragments are all the way through the bread. So the visible part is like the end result. It's not just the beginning of something. So keep that in mind. And you want to be kind of just in your own house, or if you're working with a seller, those are things that you could say, well, you knew that happened, so we can get that taken care of. But if you're working with a buyer and they don't have the history of the house, they don't know the house, you want to find the source of water, make sure it's eliminated, and then that would get cleaned up however that needs to be done. And the EPA says if it's under 9 square feet, you can clean it up yourself. They say don't use bleach because they don't want you to get sick from the fumes of the bleach, which cracks me up every time because bleach is what everyone wants to use, and they think not to use it for other reasons, but it's the fumes that the EPA is worried about. But you can get somebody to clean it up. As you are preparing a house for, like you've got a listing, or you're going in with a buyer. So think of these from a listing perspective, and then think of if you see any of these things that we are going to talk about now for the last 15 minutes, is you're going to see these things, be knowing that there's going to likely be higher levels of mold in the air inside. And I just did testing on a house that was essentially vacant. Well, not just, I did it in the fall, but they had chrysanthemums the house was totally vacant with hardwood floors. The only thing in the house was a couple of potted chrysanthemums live in dirt with water in the living room on the fireplace hearth, like to make it look more festive. It was around Thanksgiving. And so they had them there. Well, the levels were higher in there and we couldn't figure out why. And then I was able to see that there were those there, and it was like, oh, well, this makes sense because plants bring mold because there's water and dirt. So all of these things, and I know I've been on here long enough for you to read it, but Erin dropped off and she came back, so I'll leave it for another minute or two. But if you've on your listings put a cover on the sump crock, that sump pump that area can just have moisture sitting in it. So have a cover on there. Not only will a cover help with mold, but eliminating the mold getting into the air or moisture into the air, but also with radon levels. So before a radon test, also you'd want to put a cover on there. Any laundry that's down there, especially I had a hockey player for a son and soccer player, and sweaty stuff can just sit there and ferment, basically. It gets all moldy, and then we You've got a problem. I'm not saying you have to do the laundry. I'm just saying get it out of there. Also, you want to keep the washing machine open most of the time so that it can dry out. However, before the home inspection, close it up because that is where any little bits of mold that might be in the gasket around the opening to the washing machine can be collecting and just have some mold growth there. The other thing is, this is why I don't like testing in ensuite bedrooms, and I really don't like testing in bathrooms or kitchens because washcloths, sponges, loofahs, body poofs, the floor mats, dish towels, hand towels, anything, bath towels, all of those things will begin to grow mold within 36 to 48 hours. So the real technical rule is you use your towel, washcloth, body poof once, and then you wash it because it will begin to grow mold right away. And that's just important to know so that when you're doing if you have a listing and it's vacant, you could have decorative towels, but also have maybe some paper towels in there for people to dry their hands if they use the bathroom while they're there. So you don't want them to use the towels because you don't want moisture to develop there or mold to develop from the moisture. Hang on, I'm going the wrong way. There we go. I did an investigation of a property in Carroll County that was hardwood floors, leather furniture. The place was neat as a pin, but they found high levels of mold. When the home inspector went through, there were high levels of mold. And so they asked me to come in and do this investigation. And so I went and looked at it and said, clean out the fridge, get rid of all the icky food, run the garbage disposal. Some people just don't run it and things go down there and they just sit there. And that allows mold to grow. And because it's got such a high level of water, because it's sitting in there, that would likely be one of those black molds. And black mold doesn't mean it's necessarily bad, or that toxic one. There's fuzzy and there's slimy. And the fuzzy is not the one that creates the most mycotoxins. That's not the Stachybotrys or the Chaetomium. So you're running the garbage disposal with some sliced up lemon or other citrus fruit. The oil actually helps coat that stuff and get other stuff out of the garbage disposal. Sponges, dishcloths, dish towels, get the trash out. Don't leave the trash sitting in the kitchen, under the sink or whatever. Also look under the sink. Is there water? Is something leaking? That would be something to do before a home inspection just to make sure that there's nothing there. Any wood should not be kept in the house if you're getting ready to have a home inspection because that wood and you saw it on that report, can cause the mold levels to be very high in the air. And it's simply because you brought the outside in. It's not a big deal if it doesn't bother you when you live there. But if a buyer does mold testing for peace of mind because they don't see anything else, that could be the turning point for them. They're like, oh no. And so then we're explaining that. The other thing is those plants. We had another property in December that had high levels inside. Well, they had a live holly plant in the house. They had live pine garlands on the mantle. They had a live wreath on the front door, and then they had some other plant in the kitchen. The levels were high in the house, and there was no other explanation for where it was coming from. Not a clue. And once they got rid of those, had us go retest, and it was fine. And people lived there. But there was nothing else that we could find. I also did one for a woman recently who had been trying to figure out what was making her sick, and her doctor said, well, test your house for mold. It was high levels. She had tons of plants. And she was lucky enough to be able to take all the plants and put them all out in the garage. And then, so she had a garage, we could just test. And she was reacting to, and what was testing high was the mold levels from those plants, from the dirt. So while we love plants because they purify the air and they make us feel better and they give some humidity, it can also give high levels of mold. So if you're sensitive to mold, that would be another clue or another thing that you could deal with. Also, the dog beds. Those things, if you've got dogs, my dogs are 95 pounds and their dog beds are enormous. I'm sure if you tested our house, and I have an air purifiers going downstairs and upstairs, but if you test a house that has the dog bed, then that could be give high levels as well. So just be thinking along these lines. And then I did a mold test actually the day before yesterday, and I went to test, and they had a bunch of towels hanging on the door of their bathroom. And so they were hanging from hooks. So there were three big towels hanging from hooks. And I was like, oh gosh, they're just all clumped together. Can you take these out of here, please? So that while I'm testing in this area, so at least, so she took them out, and then I waited about 20 minutes, and then I went back and tested in that spot. Um, the big thing to know is if you've got high levels of mold, you've got to clean or get rid of the anything porous, because anything porous will have those spores and the hyphal fragments inside there. So if you've got a metal desk or a metal thing on the wall and it's got mold on it, wipe it down and see if it comes back. What I recommend is using a fungicide, and Home Depot and every place has some kind of fungicide. I don't have a favorite. I just generally go with the cheapest one. And then you will want to test, and this it's funny because I get texts from people randomly. I was just doing something. I haven't talked to you in a year, but every time I just found some mold at my house, and so I got some cleaner and some fungicide, and I did what you said, because the bottle is going to tell you to spray it on the wall, spray it on the affected area. That's not what you do, because when you spray it, the spores go out. They spread. So you spray it onto a cloth or paper towel or whatever you're going to use, and then wipe it. But this is so, and I can't remember who it was, but just texted me and said, and I sprayed it on the cloth, just like you said to. But now every time I see mold, I think of you. I was like, well, good. Share that with people. Share with people not to spray it and make it worse. And you want to ask other people for remediation companies. Ask for people that you can rely on. Ask people who've done a lot of transactions, who've had some situations where they've had to deal with it. And I mean, Kirsten can help you. There are a lot of good ones, but there's no licensing specifically in Maryland for it. They tried to pass a law about it in like 2013 or something, and it might have been even earlier, and it never got funded. But what they wanted was people to be able to, if they were going to do remediation, they had to at least be a licensed contractor if they were going to be cutting out drywall and stuff. And that is not the case. So if you don't have someone who can be referred to you, then you want to go to a company that has a reputation for doing this. So like ServPro or Paul Davis Restoration or Healthy Home Restoration, any of those companies that actually do this, and they've got their own certifications, because that means at least their people have some training on what needs to be done. And they say you can clean up your own mold if it's a relatively small area. If it's your own house, you can do whatever you want. And in a house with that you're listing, you're going to have to provide evidence that someone did it who knew what they were doing, and probably clearance testing as well to make sure it's done. You may also get a warranty that is like, we guarantee our work for a short period of time, but it will only be a short period of time, because if there is any mold left, it will begin to grow again if there's a new leak or something. And we've seen that many times. So if you're working with tenants, part of what you should be having in your lease agreement is, or if you have a rent back, which Kirsten can get into, because I know most people think that's a horrible idea also, but if you have a rent back, part of what you want to say to have in your agreement is that the person who's staying in the house does not turn off the dehumidifier, the sump pump, and if those have to remain plugged in for you to be responsible for something. And I've come across a lot of tenants who complain about mold growth, and they unplug the dehumidifier and or the sump pump because they were noisy and they didn't like them. And because so many people just don't know what those are for. And when you're working with people for whom buying a home is a total paradigm shift. They've never lived in a house that was owned by someone they knew, and they are moving in there. They're buying their first house. They may see a sump pump as a sign of a water problem, you want to remind them that that's actually a good thing. That means that someone is handling the water around the house. And they're not required because there's also a misperception that they're required in all homes and they're not. I had a house, my house in Laurel when I lived there, we had two. Our house was on a spring, so we had a sump pump at the front and a sump pump at the back, and they were going all the time. And having a dehumidifier in an old house in the basement makes perfect sense because basements were not designed for us to live in originally. They were designed to keep us away from the water and the critters. And so when we try and turn that into the kids room or the kids hangout, or you're going to rent the basement to your cousin or whatever you're doing, that is all you've got to modify the space in a way that handles the fact that it wasn't built for people to live down there, especially if you're doing something Federal Hill or in Baltimore City, those older homes. But also basements just weren't built for that. So it just takes a little bit of extra work, and it's worth it because you get the space. So dehumidifiers are not a bad thing, but if the seller's going to take the dehumidifier, then your buyer needs to get a new dehumidifier when they move in. And if you're writing the contract, you might just say, ask them to leave the dehumidifier. Now, what I've said a lot about in this conversation is that I've given you a lot of stuff that is beyond the scope of what a home inspector should be telling you. And the only reason I do that is because we're here in a space without clients. So that we're not like I'm not overstepping and stepping on your toes of your expertise. But I'm bringing it up here because I have been vice presidents of real estate associations, and I have led committees, chaired committees, and I've been on the board of directors for Howard County Association for 4 years, and I see what you deal with. I teach CE, and I know more than your over 11,000 hours of volunteering with real estate organizations. And so I really get what you're dealing with. And oh, and I'm on the executive board for Maryland Realtors too. So I really, really have a deep understanding of what you're dealing with and the changes that you see in forms and different rules and laws as they come up. So don't expect other inspectors to or us on an inspection to get this deep. This was really just, let me give it to you straight because there's no sense in wasting time and trying to beat around the bush and pretend I don't know stuff and pause every 5 seconds to have Kirsten interject with the reality of it, because she and I know each other in a way that we can actually do that, and we can read each other's faces and just get it. Here we go. This is that you need to say this. Oh my gosh, I thought I was on the last slide. We're done. Basically, this is everything we just talked about. I forgot to actually switch to this slide, but it was same thing. And then, so I'll leave it like this so that if people are watching it as a recording, they can do it. But when you clean up, as long as you remove the water, you don't have to remove the source of water, you'll be okay. The last thing I'll say is if there is mold in the attic, because I know this happens a lot, if there's mold in the attic or what is potential microbial growth in the attic, then which is what we call it instead of mold, because we don't know for sure because we haven't tested, is if that attic space is not conditioned space, it's considered outside. So that air that's in the attic is not usually getting down into the rest of the living space, except if we go up there and we test and we see it, and then we come down and then you say, yes, will you test, please? I just want to know if it's up here in this hallway and stuff. Well, I was just up in this place that was kind of moldy. I'm thinking kind of moldy. So I may have the stuff on my body from the attic. Don't stress about the stuff in the attic. What I would say is if you want to know if there's something there, a lot of times it's because the ventilation isn't good in the attic. And then we will have already said something about that in the report. Ventilation needs to be added, and then do a bulk sample of what's up there. But you don't want to test the air in the crawl space or the attic for that exact reason. Those are usually considered out, not part of the living space. So and the air is not exchanged with the inside air. Whew, there we go.
Yeah, that was a mouthful, huh?
Oh, yeah.
I figured it would be with this big topic,
Yes. So any questions before we log off? And if you come up with any, you can always just, Kirsten can give you my information. Just shoot me a text or call me.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Rachel.
I
Thank
do have
you.
one other question.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Yes,
let's hear it.
Dennis.
Hello?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're
Thank you.
Always.
welcome.
What was your
And
question,
Yeah.
Dennis?
Oh, okay. I thought I was too late. Anyway, no, I'm going back to like if there's been like if a seller had like a leak in their ceiling at some point,
mhm,
and they decide to sell their house, but let's say they had a leak at some point, but it's fixed now. The leak is fixed,
mhm.
and they decide to list their home. Do they have to disclose that now that it's fixed, or no, they don't have to disclose it because it's fixed? Does that make sense?
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so that kind of question is so situationally dependent. So a lot of times if we're not sure, we might even go to a broker with that question on a specific situation. But in general, when something is fixed and we know it's fixed, then we don't usually have to disclose it. When we fix something and we think it's fixed, but we're not really sure because it's such a broad situation, I probably would disclose it. So, for example, termite damage, I'm going to say disclose it even if we think we fixed it because we can't really be sure that we got to everything because it's termites and there's a lot of the house we can't see, right? So,
Mhm.
even if we repaired it, I'm probably going to say we better disclose this. If my garbage disposal broke and started leaking water and I fixed it, that's a real example. I probably wouldn't because I've replaced the garbage disposal like I know it's fixed. Do you know what I
Oh,
mean?
I see. I see.
So
Now,
Yeah.
that
and there's another one that
yeah.
we did. We do a lot of clearance testing for some mold companies,
Mhm.
and we got called to do a mold test at a property in Columbia, and I could smell the mold
Ugh,
from the street.
ugh,
But they actually wanted me to test before they started so that the industrial hygienist could write a protocol for it.
gotcha.
So, but I could smell it from the street. It was a long driveway. It was in Allview Estates, just in case
Yeah,
if you know that area.
yeah.
And long driveway, I could smell it from the street. I'm walking up to the house. I'm like, oh my gosh, what? And the basement, it was a split foyer. The basement was completely covered in mold.
Mhm.
And even the fan blades were bowing, like you saw
Yeah,
after Katrina in the pictures
yeah,
of after. I got down there and I saw that it's growing behind the wallpaper. It's on the handle of the toilet. I mean, it's everywhere.
yeah.
And and that there was nothing upstairs that showed what the problem had been. All the wood floors were brand new and they were all buckled and stuff.
Oh wow.
So I sampled. There was a lot of different types of molds there, and then several months later, I got called in to do a home inspection there. A buyer just randomly called us to do there or randomly chose that property. The buyer was referred by their agent. That wasn't the
Mhm.
random part. I ended up there and I pulled up and I was on the street and I was like, this house is so familiar. Oh my gosh. And I felt this like, what is my duty? This buyer
Yeah,
is expecting me to share everything. And I felt this like
yeah,
dread of what am I going to do? And I
yeah,
got up to the house and I got inside and I just was like, I'm going to feel out this situation. But it's
yeah,
good to have, like, I had that thought and I didn't have to deal with it. And I'll tell you why. But it was good to have had that thought so that
yeah,
then I can now know how to handle that in the future and then have my team understand how to handle it. But I go in there and the
yeah.
buyer is there with their agent and
Uh-huh.
the listing agent and a photo album, a literal photo album on the counter of
Yeah,
pictures before,
and after.
during the remediation, after, and
Yeah,
the testing.
yeah,
So that there was no question, no neighbors were going to say, oh, by the way, did you
yeah,
know? And
yeah,
have there be any worries? Because what I've found is that preparing people
yeah.
really gives, and you as the listing agent with that disclosure information
Mhm.
of even though it was done, because
Yeah,
it's just like the garbage disposal, it was done. You really didn't have to say anything. But when
yeah,
you are extra transparent in a way
yeah,
that doesn't put the seller at risk,
yeah,
from as a fiduciary, you don't want to do that, but you do want to say, you're like, this doesn't put you at risk. And if a
yeah,
buyer knows all this happened,
yeah,
and it was cleaned up, you look
yeah.
like a hero for sharing it. And I
Absolutely.
tell you, those buyers were thrilled and they
Mhm.
didn't really like their agent. And I
Mhm.
know that they used that listing agent again to list the house
Mhm.
and then to buy their next house. So I
Yeah.
would say from a just purely from a relationship standpoint,
Yeah.
I mean, that blew my mind. And I want to say that was probably 15 years ago. By the way,
Yeah.
what had caused it was they were growing marijuana. The
Oh,
lower level was a marijuana grow house.
well.
And that was the moisture because each plant takes about 2 liters of water a day.
Oh, gotcha. Wow. Yeah. So anyway, just with like that's a huge disclose like that was a big thing. Like of course, like
But
and
they didn't have to because it was done. But you knew
yeah,
the neighbors were going to say something
of
at some point.
course. Yes. Yeah. And so Dennis, like with your question, like if anybody who coaches with me, like we usually talk about this stuff about it because it's not all black and white about whether or not you have to disclose something and whether or not you should, but that's sort of a general idea. And if any question at all, talk to your coach, talk to a broker because we don't want to do the wrong thing there.
And I have a question for you, Kirsten. One of the things
Yeah.
I am always think of when it comes to disclosing is if it's something that if the buyer knew about it, might
Yes.
cause them to change their mind, might cause them
Yeah.
to say, I don't want to buy it.
Yeah.
You want to disclose.
Yeah. Yep.
Is that
If it would materially affect their decision, yes.
got it? Okay.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely right.
Okay. Because that in my head, like I'm always trying to think of how
Yeah.
to document things so that you get it. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. And like it's funny like I mean we talk about this all the time just because there's so many things that could be wrong with the house and like do you need to disclose it or not? But yeah.
yes, the
Well,
whole situation is so nuanced. It's all of it for home inspectors
yeah.
and for you. It's just yes. So.
Yeah. 100%.
So anyway, well, thank you very much for having me again.
Thank you so much for coming, and I'm sure it'll be again soon. I'll be reaching out to get the next, couple months set up soon.
That will be wonderful. And then would you mind sending me the recording for this?
Sure,
Would it be okay if I use it like use a couple of clips from it?
100%. I can send the recordings of all of them. I have them
Oh
all.
my gosh, that would be
Yeah,
fantastic. Thank you. Because I always want to and I never do.
yeah,
And there are so many scary home inspectors on social media.
yes,
And I get that if I don't get out there and actually say something, I'm going
yeah,
to like no one else is doing that.
right,
I have
right,
to say, forget about the algorithm. People need to hear this, and
yeah,
my inspector said something about it recently because if our buyers are like, well, I've never bought a house and I know nothing about it.
yeah,
Most of the time, that's just not true because they've looked on YouTube and Instagram and
right,
everything else. So
yeah,
and
yeah.
TikTok,
There is something, right?
yeah. So okay,
Yeah.
well, thank you very much, and to the four of you who are still here, 10 on a Friday afternoon, thank you for being here. It's wonderful having you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Very helpful.
All
Have a
right.
mold-free weekend.
Oh, there you go. Love it.
Bye.
Bye.